Today's Reddit story comes from the subreddit TraumatizeThemBack, and it's titled, Neighbor wouldn't quit revving his engine. I made his backyard all but unusable until he quit. Last spring, my old neighbor, who was a saint, sold her house and moved away. The people that moved in were awful. The guy, who we'll call Pete, owns some sort of a new black Mustang that sounds like it has no muffler, and he revs it up and down the subdivision streets in the evenings literally 5 days a week, when a lot of people, myself included, sit on the back porch and watch TV during the summer. It is relentless. This guy also drives up and down the state highway that is on the other side of my house doing the same thing, but louder, because it is a 55-mile-per-hour speed limit. You can hear it for miles. And he has friends over regularly in the backyard, and they sit there on the weekends and some weeknights revving up the car. It truly is so loud that you cannot do anything but wait for him to be done. There was a big Facebook conversation in the HOA group, and a bunch of neighbors politely asked him to not do this. Pete's exact response: I pay a lot of money for this house. I'll do what I want in my own yard, and the streets are public. Well, I didn't like that, so here's what I did next, with a little context. Our subdivision has about 150 houses on about 300 acres. It's big. Most of the properties in this subdivision are between 1 to 4 acres in size. I have a 3-acre corner. Due to an agreed upon land split and slash sale 10 years ago between the HOA, all neighbors within the vicinity, and the former owners, my next door neighbor house is on the smallest piece of property in the subdivision at 0.45 acres. Let's see. The OP posted up an attachment of what it actually looks like. Note the green borders that are all 10 feet privacy fence are all white vinyl. And note the little pentagon shape that comes in handy later. The other side of Pete's house, not bordered by somebody else's privacy fence, is on the side that my house is on. Well, I know from 15 years of living here that anytime I have a fire on the side of the yard next to Pete's, the smoke is guaranteed to travel in the direction of Pete's house. I know this because I couldn't ever have a fire when my old neighbor was outside, as it would literally fill her backyard with smoke if ever the wood had even had a hint of moisture in it. So I moved my fire pit about a dozen years ago to the other side of my house and towards the road so that I could be a good neighbor. And Pete letting me know that he wouldn't quit making noises reminded me that I just love having my fire pit right in the middle of my backyard. That's where the little pentagon in the diagram above. It took me a single weekend to dig up the pavers and blocks, move them back to my preferred spot, and get myself a fire going in my new fire pit. I just need to wait until Pete had people over. I made sure the inaugural fire was a good one. Pete had friends over. It was a nice day, so I started the fire. Got it just about started, and then I added the wettest, grossest wood I could. And about 10 minutes later, Pete and all of his friends were visibly upset by the stench, so they all went in. They came back out a little later. I added more wet, nasty wood. They went in again. I kept that up the entire day, and then I added a bunch of grass clippings to keep it going overnight. The next day, still smoldering, still smelling awful. I put out a Facebook post on the HOA website that let people know I'll be continuing to utilize my fire pit as often as possible so they could bring me their lawn scraps. I had about 20 people respond in a few hours saying their clippings were all mine. I kept the fire going. My dogs are good alarms and they rush outside anytime anybody in Pete's backyard. So I would hear the dogs scramble, go out, and add more clippings. After about 3 weeks, Pete and his wife came out and very kindly asked what was going on with the fire pit. She very politely informed me that her hair would smell like campfire if she went into her backyard for any amount of time, and they could smell it coming into their house through their ductwork. He said I was making it hard for him to enjoy his backyard with his friends. They asked me if I could ease back with the fire because I probably didn't know that it was impacting so much of their home life. I looked at him and his wife, and I said that it was clear that sometimes we didn't recognize how big of an effect something could have on our neighbors until they told us about it. But then I said, as objectively as possible, that I normally live by the same I'll do what I want in my yard thought process as Pete does. I have a right to enjoy my yard. I looked at Pete dead in the eye and said, and I know you support that because of how the conversation concluded about your car, right, Pete? He looked at me like I scratched his favorite CD. He knew what I was doing, and his wife looked at him and it just dawned on her. She said she gets it, and we won't hear the Mustang anymore. I said thanks. I took a gamble and put the fire out right after that. It was the right call. I haven't talked to them much since. I'm not too concerned about that either because I haven't heard the Mustang since either. Ooh. So, even though this story came from TraumatizeThemBack, it sounds more like petty revenge too. I guess it can fit into both subreddit. Anyways, I think what OP did was perfect. Obviously, Pete was so high above and saying, oh, this is my property, I'm going to do what I want, and just disregard all his neighbors, concerned. He says, this is my property, I pay for this, I'm going to do whatever I want. That makes you a bad neighbor, Pete. And, since properties are very expensive, you're going to be stuck with the same people for a very long time. And you do not want to be making enemies with your neighbors because you never know when you need them. Anyways, let's see what some of the commenters have to say about this. First commenter says, that's a great story. Lucky for you, the wife was reasonable. Neighbor feuds can get dangerous. Exactly. Another commenter says, Jesus, I just had a flashback of being a kid cutting a corner of a lawn on my bike with the neighbor who owns said lawn shouting at me or us from his porch. I certainly never had any issue with that neighbor. He and his wife were generally pretty chill about us hopping the fence for toys and such. But dang, I suddenly have so much more respect and gratitude for the guy, knowing he could have straight up shot us. That's true. That's very true. And I'm very blessed with pretty cool neighbors too. We pretty much leave each other alone. We just say hi, bye, and that's about it, It's a good thing to be a good neighbor. Like I've said, you never know what you want to when you actually need their help or whatever. Because you being a bad neighbor, it just gives a bad vibe to the whole neighborhood too, And, you want to be known as the trouble neighbor. And again, like I said, properties are really expensive. You're probably spending a lot of time with these people that are going to be with you. And, it's about community too, So, I'm glad that OP finally got through to Pete to not rev up his Mustang and disturb the rest of the neighborhood. And I'm glad that, OP found a way to do it in a very subtle way, kind of. And I'm glad that Pete and his wife finally got the message. Anyways, what do you guys think of this story? What would you have done in OP's position? I would love to hear about it in the comment section. And remember, if you like these types of stories, to continue to like and subscribe. I'll see you guys later.